All right, welcome to our next speaker, Alexandra Carnio. She is no stranger to entrepreneurship and the power of social media. She is the founder of and lead strategist behind Simplified Social. Alex has been working in social media since before Facebook pages were even a thing. I can't believe that, Alex.
Me neither.
Now, Alex has worked for organizations including the Alberta Women's Entrepreneurs and West Edmonton Mall's Marketing Develop. Now, while at the Alberta Women Entrepreneurs, she worked as their program facilitator and marketing manager, where she trained over 1,500 entrepreneurs on business plan writing, marketing, and social media. It was there that Alex realized there was a significant knowledge gap and a sense of overwhelm when it came to business owners and social media. After countless requests from entrepreneurs wanting her to take on their social accounts, she decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship officially. Over the last 4 years, Simplified Social has grown to include services beyond social media management, including website design, search engine optimization, and comprehensive digital marketing strategy sessions. Alex and her team of digital content specialists have worked with over 75 unique companies on social media strategy, digital advertising, social media management, and so much more. Alex is excited to share her passion and knowledge of social media for business with you today. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I'm so excited to be with you here virtually. I wish it was in person, but I think that this is a great opportunity to, because I live online all day anyways, that this is going to be awesome to share what I have from the behind the scenes of my computer.
I think this is amazing. I'm really excited actually for this virtual opportunity as well. So where you are specialized in social media, maybe we can just start talking about just how each platform works.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have a really good slide that I like to share. And I think right now, especially with working from home for a lot of people, but also with people working in the hospitals right now, I think we're all kind of fueled by coffee, if I'm not wrong with that. So I'm going to share a quick slide with you. Just one sec here, share screen. Can you see my screen here?
Absolutely, yep.
All right, so I like to share social media through coffee. So this is just a very basic, quick slide I want to go through. So Twitter is I am drinking #coffee. Facebook, I like coffee. Instagram, here's a photo of my coffee. Pinterest, browse my collection of coffee recipes. LinkedIn, my coffee drinking skills have been endorsed. YouTube, here's a recorded video of me drinking coffee. Periscope, I'm not going to go into too much because it's kind of redundant now. And Snapchat, this is a coffee that will self-destruct in 10 seconds. So that's kind of how I like to start with all of my basic social media courses is through coffee. I think everyone can relate to that. I've done this with dogs. I've done this with donuts. Really, it comes down to the ones that I really like to focus on are Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, especially from a business lens. And that's what I'm really going to talk to you about today.
Awesome. Is there like a particular age that's most likely to follow a brand? So, when we're thinking about our target markets, is there a particular one we should be looking at in terms of our target age?
Yeah, so it totally depends on which platforms you decide to focus on. But research has shown that the ages between 18 to 34 are the most likely to follow a brand on social media. So the one thing I always like to tell people that when they're looking for their audience on social media is really just to keep in mind where your ideal audience is. And I'll get into a little bit more of like the exact platforms and where people live in terms of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. But I will say that it's always changing. Even a few months ago, my 80-year-old grandmother signed up for Instagram. I don't think she's as loyal to it as someone who's maybe 25 is, but it's always shifting. But I think that there's definitely opportunity, and the way that you approach your social media, for me, and my standpoint is that it's always way better to pick one or two platforms and do them really well than it is to try and be everything to everyone. And I think that especially when you're starting out in entrepreneurship, you can burn yourself out really easily when you're trying to do it all. An entrepreneur, you wear a million different hats. You're a bookkeeper, you're a marketer, you're trying to do like literally everything. So when you're trying to be active on all these social media platforms, I really find that people, they'll start and they'll be like, I'm going to do every single platform and I'm going to post every single day. And they do that for about a week. and then you don't see anything from them like at all ever again, or they might do it again like 2 months later down the road. So I always say it's better to pick one or two, do them really well, and then go from there.
I have to confess.
Okay.
I was one of
Confess to
those
me, Tammy.
people, right?
Yes.
And I learned quickly that the messaging on Facebook needs to be different than the messaging on Instagram and on LinkedIn. So you couldn't just blanket the same message to all of those platforms because you need to interact differently. The clientele are different on those platforms. So you have to tailor it if you're going to do that.
Yes. And I will say though, you can reuse content across platforms. It's just a matter of how you make that content work for those platforms.
Yeah.
So if you have a blog post, let's say, that you want to share on all your platforms, maybe you're sharing a longer section of that on Facebook on Monday, you're sharing a shorter section of that in a tweet on Wednesday, and you're sharing like a quote from that in a picture on Instagram on Friday. The chances are is that if someone's following you on Facebook, they're probably also following you on your other platforms as well. So it's good if you can diversify that content and stay top of mind in a way that isn't spamming people, but also makes it interesting that they want to continue to follow you. So try and reuse content as much as possible. I'm not saying that you can't do that. Just make sure that you're doing it in a way that isn't like, just a copy and paste solution for your content.
That's kind of what I was doing.
That's
Why I
okay.
was saying,
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say to people after they come to our workshop, it's like, that's one thing that if you can do is like, I'm not going to tell you, like, you can't like reuse content. Just promise me that you're not going to hit like auto schedule to all. That's all I ask of you.
Yeah, it does take just a little bit, like a few minutes to think about what's your primary purpose for those different softwares.
Yeah, it does. So it will talk more about kind of like scheduling and what that looks like a little bit later on. But I definitely think that at the end of the day, you only have so much time. So being really efficient and effective with how you use social media and how you schedule what you have is really important, and how we kind of look at the big picture of your entrepreneurship mindset too with social media, because social media it's a wormhole, right? Like you could spend hours on it if you really wanted to. And I guess that's why I have the job doing what I do, is because some people look at it and they're like, like I don't want to spend all this time doing it. But if you really strategize it in a way that makes sense for you, it can actually be something that doesn't have to take up too much time if it's well thought out.
Yeah, I definitely know about the time drain, and I'm sure lots of our entrepreneurs watching will be feeling that overwhelm as well. I recently just, and it's not on your list today, but I recently just discovered TikTok because someone suggested I should be on there for my business. I'm like, I didn't get that sense that it was a business platform, so I was watching it, and my gosh, hours would go by, and I'd be like, oh, I can't even see straight anymore. I need to get off of this platform. But I didn't learn anything about business on there, so I don't think that's probably going to be my space.
Yeah. And again, it's knowing your audience, knowing where it is. I wouldn't say that a lot of the audiences for the clients that we work with are on TikTok. But again, if you're looking into that younger demographic of teens and young adults, it might be some place that you should consider focusing on. But if you do want to, go on TikTok and learn some dances, I would be interested in following you.
Well, my son and I have been talking about starting a TikTok station just for fun, but let's get back to the social media here.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going ahead if I ask you about customer service at this point. Is there more you want to talk to this about ages? Like I'm thinking for myself, Facebook is usually where I post because a lot of nurses are often thrown in there because of school projects. They make up groups to keep in touch through Facebook. So finding my nurses to come to conferences is on Facebook primarily. But is there an age I should really be considering looking at a different platform?
So with customer service, I'll kind of jump back to that. Like I think I have a slide pretty much in here right now. The one thing I was going to say about customer service is that with social media, it really is a customer service tool. So when I was working at West Edmonton Mall, I was running the social media for the mall, which might sound like it was glamorous, but I will assure you that a lot of what I did there was looking at tweets, looking at comments, looking at Instagram messages on a 24/7 basis in a room with like 6 huge screens of digital feeds to see what was going on. And that's what a lot of big brands are doing. So when you're reaching out to TELUS, to WestJet, to Air Canada, to these big brands, their social media department is really customer service nowadays. So the thing being here is that 71% of consumers who have a good social media customer experience are likely to recommend that company to another person. So I don't know if you've ever done this before. Like, have you ever reached out to a brand about something on social media that you've had a bad experience with?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And have you got a reply?
Yes. Not the one I
Yes.
wanted, but yes.
No? Yeah, I know. Like, I know Twitter, or Telus and I have a saga going on Twitter sometimes, but I think that in the way that our society is now, we expect that, right? Like, if you reach out to someone on social media for a problem, like, you expect that you're going to get the problem fixed on social. And so the thing to be mindful of here is that if you're putting out your brand on social, you're opening yourself up to that. If you're starting out small and don't have a huge following, it's less of an issue. But as you grow and get more followers and more people know about who you are, social media really is about customer service in a lot of ways. So these big brands, like, content is one piece of it, but I'd say probably 75% of how they're managing their social is managing their engagement and getting those replies and those comments and those messages taken care of.
Right. So it sounds like a strategy for building your brand online is to make sure you are responding to comments, even if they're just like, hey, watched your stuff, it was great, but to comment and let them know that you see that and build that relationship online.
Yes, that's a really good point too, is that to always make sure that you're replying to people. You see so often that, people will not reply if they have a 1-star review on their page, or not reply if they have a 5-star review on their page. So I always say, like, the best practice is to always reply. If it's a 1-star review, never start the keyboard war. Try and keep things as professional as possible. Show that you tried to address the problem. Give an email, give a phone number that they can reach out for more information, but don't start the back and forth dialogue on social media about addressing the problem, because the problem is with that is that there's some people you're just never going to win with, right? It's like if you go on like a global news article and you see like the keyboard warriors on there, like, it's half the entertainment of going on Facebook on those news articles. But same thing with like the positive reviews. You see so many times that people take the time to leave a positive review and then no one says anything. So even if it's a simple, like, thank you so much for, leaving this positive message, that can go a long way too in building some good brand loyalty as well. Because people like to feel like they're heard. And if someone's taking the time out of their day to do that, it's a good way to build some loyalty around that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's more than just marketing. This is kind of your customer service support all in one platform.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of professional businesses, nurses who have regulations and these um, restrictions around what they can and cannot do, is there certain content that they should be worried about sharing, or that they're safe to share?
Yes, content is a big, big piece of social media. And that's a question that I get asked all the time is, what type of content should I be sharing? So content can look a lot of different ways. So visual content is 40 times more likely to get shared on social media than any other type of content. So visual content could be photos, it could be videos, it could be silly memes, it could be GIFs, anything like that is visual that grabs people's attention really quickly. So keeping like the text and the links to a minimum is really important in getting engagement. The other thing I'll say with that is that sometimes people have like these links and these like blocks of text that they want to share. So finding a way that you can visualize that kind of content is important. So back to what I said about the scheduling. So if you have this blog article that you want to share and then maybe putting it into an Instagram format, taking excerpts of a blog and making it into a visual is a really good way to do that. So one thing I will say with when you have regulations, just knowing your college of practice, what they allow, always kind of double checking. Sometimes I've seen clients in dental type industries that we've worked with, or chiropractic, get into trouble with what they've posted. So if you don't know, ask. Because it's better to be safe than sorry. And if you have any questions, it's better to ask before you post. And if you're questioning something at your core, whether it's going to be okay to post, I always say get that second set of eyes on it, because if you're already questioning it, it might be a good sign that you should have a second set of eyes on it before you're posting it. And I think in a professional setting, it's really important too, because people are going to you in that higher standard of care. It's not like you're a convenience store or that you're selling a pair of socks. You're a professional healthcare provider. So just knowing that you have that like due diligence that you have to put out there is really important to know what's acceptable. And a lot of the colleges of practice, they'll have guidelines and different things for their providers of what's okay and what's not okay to post on social media. They also have communications coordinators that will usually work with different marketing people within different offices to let them know what's okay, what's not, and help them vet content that way as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece to bring forward, is that the regulatory bodies do have parameters on social media, and you don't want to get yourself in trouble. So to be making sure that as a professional, you are in fact referencing those tools that are there for you to keep you in a safe zone for promoting and sharing your business online.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen, like worst case scenarios happen where, pages, they want them to shut down and things like that. So the last thing you want to do is spend all this time building an audience, time, energy, money lost, to have it shut down by your regulatory body. So just the thing is, if you feel like you have to question what you're posting, just get that second set of eyes on it, because you don't want to have to go down that road and lose what you've worked so hard to build. And just know, like I said, it's not like you're selling something that's quite like simple. You're a healthcare provider, so you have to take those extra precautions.
Yeah, and I'll add, I'm not sure if you're going to talk about this later, but I'll just add here that it's not just the regulatory parameters you need to consider, it's actually the platform parameters as well, that they can shut your account down if you're not following the advertising guidelines that they have also put out there. So just to be aware of both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one example of that, Tammy, is like with Facebook, for example, there's a lot of rules around like contests, let's say. So I see a lot of the times, a lot of people don't follow this. Is one example is contesting. You're not supposed to have tag a friend or share this post as a parameter to enter a contest. They can actually shut your page down if you don't follow those rules. And yet every time I go on and see these small businesses that are using that as a quick, I don't want to say scheme, but like a tactic to get people to enter their contests, but it's actually not allowed. So looking very clearly at what Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or anyone sets out as like their advertising guidelines is really important, and they change. So looking at them, like I'd say, even just if you did it like on a yearly basis, that would probably be okay. But I've seen worst case scenarios again with that happen, where people don't look at the rules and then their page gets blocked or shut down or temporarily suspended. So just know the rules of each platform before you kind of dive into it too far.
And that's why it's good to start with one and get good at it. That sounds like great.
Yes.
Great advice.
Yes, because it can be overwhelming, right? If you're trying to be active on 5 platforms and know all of their different standards and procedures, that's a bit much.
Yeah. So speaking of different platforms, are you able to talk to us a little bit about how to use each of them?
Yes, I'll kind of go into what I have. So a big question I get asked from people is, what platform is the most effective? And this totally depends on the business that you have. I always tell everyone that they should have a website and a blog, regardless of what they do, because content really is important, because being able to create content and curate content is what's going to make you successful on social media. But I'll get into the platforms now.
Okay.
So Facebook has 2.32 billion monthly active users.
Wow.
When I did this presentation in 2017, it was around 1.6 billion. So I think there's like 7 billion people in this world, something like that. So like that's huge. 2 out of 7 people in this world, let's say, are on Facebook. It's still the market leader for social networking. I mean, they've had their share of scandal with security and privacy, but it still hasn't impacted anything really. And I think a lot of the reason for that is because people don't know what to do about them, because they've started all of this. Like, they're the leader. There's no regulations around it because they don't have any, because they kind of started everything from scratch. So now they're starting to put these things in place because they've experienced it. But still, like, the average user on Facebook spends 55 minutes on it per day. Would you say you're higher or lower?
Higher.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like, let's just say it's because of our jobs.
Let's say that.
I mean, being home right now with COVID, my screen time app on my phone is kind of embarrassing to admit, but yeah, 55 minutes a day, that's just average. In 2015, Facebook influenced 52% of consumers' online and offline purchases, and more than 50 million small businesses are using Facebook to connect with customers. 4 million of those are actually paying for some advertising on Facebook too. So I'll talk a little bit more about Facebook advertising, but what I will tell you is that Facebook is a game. And if you want to be successful on Facebook, paying to play is really where they found their ability to monetize the platform. So back in, let's say, 2010, when you were a business and you posted on Facebook, everyone that followed your page, I don't know if pages were a thing in 2010, let's say 2012, you posted, there was groups before pages. You'd post to your page and everyone that liked your page would see your posts and it was great. And then Facebook realized, okay, well, maybe we should make people pay for this. So that way, like, businesses would have to pay for their actual audience that already likes their page to have to see their posts. And then it started with boosting posts. And then it got into this whole comprehensive ad network. And now Facebook totally dominates the internet. So if you go into Ads Manager to set up an ad, you'll see that not only can you advertise on Facebook by setting up a Facebook ad, you now have access to like Facebook's entire ad network, which includes a variety of different websites. It includes Instagram. It includes a ton of different places. So they totally monetized it. It's definitely how it makes so much money every year. But one thing I will say about Facebook ads is if you're going to be looking at doing them as a small business, is try and beware of that little blue boost button, because it's so easy to do. They make it easy to do on purpose, but it's a quick cash grab. You might have a few results from it, but you're really limiting what you can do with your entire advertising capability. So if you're going to be doing any kind of advertising, I really, really recommend looking into Ads Manager from Facebook. It's free. It's part of your Business Manager page, but you just have a lot more control in terms of who you're targeting with your ads, where your ads are getting placed, what your ads look like. And it's the same spend, but it just gives you a little bit more like that you can play with in terms of controls.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that went on forever, but yeah, that's
great.
I could talk about Facebook for another hour if you'd like me to.
It is something I've played with myself. So, and I'm sure many of the entrepreneurs who have started this journey have looked into that, and it's easy to spend money and not get the results when you don't really know what you're doing. So that's why you are so important to us.
Yeah, the biggest thing I'll say with any social media is that you have to set goals. You have to be realistic with your goals, and I'll talk a little bit more about strategy a little bit further into this presentation. But if you don't have a goal and you're just boosting posts and you're just like kind of hoping for the best, you're not going to know if your money is doing anything for you. And when you're especially just starting out a business, you don't have money to waste. So why waste your money on boosting a post if you don't really know what that boost is doing? So I'm all about conversion. I'm all about optimization. So the more that we can set that strategy and that foundation for success, the better.
Yeah. And I would say actually investing in someone who is in social media, because there's so much that you don't even know that you don't know when it comes to doing ads, like pixels and tracking codes and all that kind of stuff. So you can really hone in on that data. Like, I'm just learning that stuff, but the amount of time entrepreneurs will spend on that versus hiring somebody who knows it, valuable.
Yeah. It's like me and my accountant and my bookkeeper. Like, they're the most valuable people in my world. This is the first year I had a bookkeeper, and it's the first year I wasn't sitting in my basement for 3 days compiling receipts for my year end and like wiping my like tears with receipts. So, I mean, like, it's worth it if like you look at how much time things take you to do things that you don't know how to do. Yeah. And so that's kind of like being an entrepreneur myself. My advice to people is that, you have to work smarter, not harder. And so finding those little wins for yourself, even if you're paying someone to do something that you might not feel like you have the money to do, if it saves you like the time and frustration, it's worth it sometimes.
Yeah. I learned a long time ago to find the right who, because if you're an entrepreneur and you get stuck, well, you're not progressing your business forward because you're going to spend the next 3 weeks trying to learn this next thing. Whereas if you just go and hire the right who, you can move forward back to your content production.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. It's really important. So I distracted from our platform investigation.
That's all good. Should we move on to the next one?
Sounds great.
So the next one is Twitter. And Twitter, I really have a love-hate relationship with it. And I think that the reason for it is because it's a lot of work for a little result. So Twitter has 302 million monthly active users. There's 500 million tweets sent out per day, but the tweets only have an 18-minute lifespan. So what that means is that it's not that your tweet gets deleted after 18 minutes. What it means is that if I was to go on Twitter and you tweeted and I was on my homepage, if I went on there after, let's say, half an hour, I likely wouldn't even see your tweet show up in that homepage unless I went into your profile and saw it there itself. So you really have to be consistent on Twitter for it to really work for your business. So the businesses that I see it working really well for are tweeting somewhere between 1 to 7 times a day. So you're starting a business, you're trying to keep your operations going. Are you really going to be tweeting 1 to 7 times per day? I don't know. Maybe you will because that's where your audience is. But I mean, you have to kind of weigh those decisions for yourself. I find like business to business, it's still quite good. Edmonton, especially, there's like a really good events community in Edmonton. So engaging with like local hashtags and things like that, it does quite well. I know a lot of events, they still have hashtags where like if you're at like a conference, I don't know if there's a hashtag for this conference because we're virtual, but we could talk about, like we could join in on Twitter for a conference. At my wedding, I had a hashtag because that's the type of person I am. So people could like tweet or Instagram posts about my wedding with a hashtag. But I think at the end of the day, like Twitter is a lot of work for little result. Their advertising is cheaper, but it just doesn't have the same reach as a Facebook ad would.
Yeah.
The thing with Twitter too is that 80% of active users are on their mobile devices, and 92% of all interaction with tweets are link clicks. So it's kind of funny because people are literally going on Twitter to get off Twitter. They're going on, they're clicking links, they're going to other places. Yeah. So I think right now with what's going on with COVID-19, Twitter is still relevant. It's still prevalent. People are still going to Twitter to check news, and news is always going to be relevant on Twitter. Another thing too is with customer service. So back to what we talked about, 78% of people who complain to a brand on Twitter, they expect a response within an hour. And lastly, with Twitter, there's 1.3 billion accounts on Twitter, but only 328 million are actually active. There's a lot of fake accounts on there. And like just people will scoop up fake accounts, they get reported, the cycle continues. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is from a business standpoint, you really have to evaluate if you have the content to keep up with it and if you have the time to do it, because you really have to be active on it to make it work for your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do follow several Twitter accounts, but you're right. It's like, I don't know what I'm getting every time I log in. And I can scroll and scroll and scroll, or I have to specifically look for them to find their content if I want to find it for the day.
Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's totally dead and that it's not worth it. It's just a matter of, is it worth it for a new business that's just starting out? And that's to be determined, I guess.
Do you have an age, like who typically uses Twitter? Age-wise?
Age-wise, it's still a little bit older. I would say it's probably in like more of like the 30 to 45 crowd, and it's more prevalently male. It skews a little bit more male. So I think the last stat I pulled, it was like more of like a 65% male range.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good.
Instagram. So Instagram's totally exploded in the last few years since I've done similar presentations to this one. So right now, Instagram has around 500 million monthly users. 75 million people are checking it per day, probably more now, more than ever before. They say that 20% of internet users are on Instagram. So people are just jumping on this platform quicker than ever before. Business to consumer usually does a little bit better on Instagram. So if you have a physical product that you can sell and link back to. But what I will say is that with Instagram, it's totally changed in the last few years. So when I was managing Instagram for brands, even like 3 years ago, before you never even used to be able to have like a business profile on Instagram. Like you would set up a business page for Instagram like you would a consumer page, like a personal and a business, it was the same thing. But then Instagram realized like, okay, well, we're on to something. And then they got bought out by Facebook. And now it's connected to Facebook. And so if you set up your Instagram business page, it ties back to your Facebook page. And that's how you set up ads. And now you'll be able to check like your analytics, who's following you, what times of day are the best to post, who's looking at your posts, like what your insights are on each post. So I think from a business standpoint, it definitely is a little bit more powerful than it used to be. The one thing about Instagram though is that 90% of their users are still younger than 35. So if your audience is in that older demographic, it might not be as good, but if you're trying to target younger people for their parents, might be something to consider. People do follow brands quite heavily on Instagram too. That's a big part of it. People aren't just following their friends or their dogs, they're following brands as well. So brand marketing is a big part of Instagram. And I think that Instagram is probably going to overtake, I don't know if it'll overtake Facebook, but I think that it's getting to the point where more people are on Instagram than they are on Facebook nowadays, for time-wise.
Yeah, and I think that might be related to the age, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Facebook tends to be the older age bracket because that came out when we were younger. Mm-hmm. Instagram came out many years later, and I was already heavily into Facebook, so I'm like a late
Yeah.
adopter, and I think many people are older tend to be more late adopters because they're
Yeah.
comfortable with what they know. And
Yeah.
so this will probably shift as, ages carry on, that Instagram will become one of the bigger platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think for me too, like, I think that's hard when you don't necessarily have a product-based business. People kind of stress about, well, what do I post on Instagram? Because like, I don't have products. I'm not too sure what I would even post about, but I think that content strategy on Instagram has totally evolved. So whether it's quotes, whether it's facts, whether it's like behind the scenes photos, people love to see those aspects of businesses. And I think that it's going to be more and more important for businesses to be on Instagram kind of as we move forward. But another interesting thing about Instagram is that before we used to, scroll up and down to see people's feeds, like you'd see like the hot or the posts that people would put, but now we scroll across. We want to see the stories. So stories are really important now for Instagram. People want to see what's going on like in real time versus what's happening like on posts. So you'll see a lot of brands, they'll do a post and they'll make a story to let people know that there's a new post. So it's totally changed again. And I think it's probably going to change another time. So you just never really know. And that's half of the battle of what I do, is trying to keep up with what's going on and what updates are happening and what people are even doing now.
And they have Instagram TV, not new. That's been for a while, I think, but you can now just go
Yeah.
live for an indeterminate amount of time. It seems like people are like
Yes.
doing their 2-hour workouts on Instagram,
Yeah.
broadcasting that, right? Getting followers.
Yeah. So before, like you could only post, right now you can only post a video into your actual like feed for, it has to be like, I think under 2 minutes. But now if you want it to be longer, you just link to Instagram TV and it can go much longer than that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how it evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but like Instagram, the thing with Instagram is that it's aesthetic, right? So people like to see like the really good, like powerful grids. And I'll share these slides with the participants so they can go into them in more depth. But like, here's just a few that I've really liked, is like a kombucha company. They don't always have products to share, but they share like, some like really inspirational quotes. Jillian Harris, I'm sure everyone knows who she is. She always has like, like a nice filter on all of her photos. And I have some good tips about like photo editing and things that you can do to make your content look better that I'll share as well. You don't have to be a professional photographer. There's lots that you can do to make your photos look good. There's some really good resources for photos as well that you can get for free. And my best friend that I use for any kind of graphics is called Canva. I'm sure you've likely heard of Canva. So it's, canva.com. So what Canva is, it's like a free graphic design tool. They have paid versions where you can upload like your brand colors, all of that. I have a paid version that I use because I have multiple people on the platform. So it's just easier for us. But yeah, what it is like you can go on and like make templates. You can make Instagram posts, you can make Facebook posts, and make them look a little bit more visually appealing. And it's a lifesaver for a lot of brands. So I think that's really elevated the look of a lot of people's Instagram profiles. And so I'd say like, if you're just kind of starting out with how you want your brand to look, is trying to develop some consistent templates within Canva to kind of give your brand that overall look and feel.
Consistency is important. And I will say that I have struggled with consistency for the NurseMinder brand for a very long time. Not so much for my Conquer Conflict brand. I have that nailed down right now. But the other one, I just feel like I do a lot of YouTube posts and there's no consistency in my video thumbnails. But I know that's an important thing. And I just feel like I don't know if I'm nailed down there yet, but it is important to work on that.
Yeah, definitely. Like it makes everything just like look better, right? Like if you go on to like, I mean, I'm also maybe a little too type A, but I always love when a grid like has a theme, it has consistent filters, it's balanced. Great quality photos is nice, but it doesn't need to be that way. You can edit your photos to a point. Like I use Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. There's free versions of that. But I think that at the end of the day, it's like, your brand has to be true to who you are. So I think that as a new business, really kind of nailing your brand in the beginning is really good to figure out before you start posting to social, instead of trying to figure out like who you are as you're posting to social. I mean, but that sometimes happens. Like I look at my brand, who I was 5 years ago, to who my brand is now. It's very different. I think brands evolve and that's totally fine. But the thing is, your brand has to speak to your ideal client. And so if your ideal client is a woman in her 30s, like you look at Jillian Harris and she epitomizes that. Like her brand speaks to that, who she works with, who she is influenced by, who she promotes. Like it speaks to that audience. She's not promoting things that her ideal audience wouldn't like agree with, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind, like as you're kind of branching into the social media world, is just like, who is your ideal audience and what is the content that they actually care about?
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point.
Next, I have LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is actually how I got my first client ever. I didn't think I wanted to ever be an entrepreneur. I have entrepreneurs in my family and I thought, that was good for them, but I didn't think it was a little too risky. I didn't think that's where I wanted to go. But I actually spent a lot of time working on my LinkedIn profile. And the biggest thing that I did was edit my headline on LinkedIn. So usually you'll see people have their headline as like their job title, like I'm the manager of this at this company. But you should use your headline as really more of like a tagline for yourself. So for me, I had set mine to social media expert and brand builder in Edmonton. And it just so happened that someone was searching social media in Edmonton and my profile popped up. And he sent me a message and said, hey, like I saw that you do social media in Edmonton. Would you like to go for coffee and see if you could help my business? And that's how Simplified Social happened. And so,
background. Oh
yay!
my God.
Yeah, so LinkedIn really does work, and I think it really is powerful from a business owner perspective. LinkedIn is a really good way to market yourself professionally, but also from a company standpoint. There's 500 million users on LinkedIn. It's definitely more of a Monday to Friday platform still. I found like more people are using it a little bit in odder hours than odder times right now, just because of everyone kind of going through this uncertainty. But definitely it's a good place to get recommendations, join groups, really good business to business potential. You can also do some LinkedIn advertising as well, but it is extremely expensive. So I always tell people like it's a good place to do qualified advertising if you're looking to target other companies like for your advertising. But just know like the cost per click of a LinkedIn ad, you're looking at an average of like $5 to $7 per click.
Wow, that's good.
So it's super expensive. So you really have to just keep that in mind with everything that you're looking at with LinkedIn. But I definitely will say that keeping your profile as up to date and fresh and relevant as possible is really important.
Excellent. Okay. Is this where we're going to talk about engagement next? Or you want to talk a little bit more about content?
Yeah, we can talk about engagement. I think that's kind of a good next segue into all of this. And like I said, I'll share the slides so people can go through this and kind of peruse them too.
Sure. Because we know that engagement is about likes and sharing and comments and getting people to your platform, whichever that is, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So maybe we can go into that a bit.
Yes. So I always say like engagement is on its own level of social media. It's not customer care. It's not content. It's on like its whole separate level. So this is kind of like just a funny little cartoon that I found. This guy, he has a lot of followers, but he has no social media engagement. And the girl says, just misspell something. So if you want people to comment and let you know what's going on in your post, just misspell something and they'll do that.
So true.
But yeah, so engagement is likes, it's shares, it's comments, it's not follows. So the biggest thing that to keep in mind is that it's better to have a higher level of engagement than it is to have a higher number of followers. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times when brands are vetting influencers to work with, they're looking at their engagement numbers versus their followers. So if you see someone that has like 100,000 followers, but only 100 people are liking their pictures, you usually know that they bought their followers, which is a real thing that people are doing, which is crazy. So engagement is really a game. And the thing is that it's a full-time job. It's something that you really have to be mindful of. And so I have a few different ways of like, especially on Instagram, that you can work on it. I say it's the new social currency. It's really like a long-term relationship. So it's not that you post something and then you have engagement. It's a committed and lengthy relationship. It takes dedication and readiness to adapt and thinking about like what your audience actually wants. It's essentially like a marriage. So just knowing that you have to always know what your audience is wanting and adapting to what they want, and ensuring that if they like it, that you keep posting that type of content. And if they don't, that you're not posting that content anymore. So looking at your analytics is a big part of social media, because if you see there's a trend and people are really liking this type of content, then that's the kind of stuff that we should try and mimic and replicate. But if people aren't engaging with the type of content you're posting, clearly there's something that's not working. And so you need to look at what you're posting and say, okay, what's going on here and how can we retweak what we're working with? So boosting engagement, the one thing I say to people about this is to stop posting in real time except for stories and live tweeting. So I see this a lot with people, especially entrepreneurs that are super busy, is that they're not really thoughtful in how they post their content. They're just posting on the fly. They forget to post. They just post when they're rushing to do so. And so what happens with that is they're not really putting thoughtful captions on their posts. They're kind of posting crappy quality photos. It's just not looking very good overall. So what happens with that is if you're not taking the time to really be thoughtful in what you're putting out there, your engagement's probably going to suffer. So I always say, like with stories, that's kind of your time to go behind the scenes in the brand, to be raw, to be authentic. But when it comes to, let's say, your Instagram like feed itself, that's when you should be taking a little bit more time to put into like what the photo looks like, what the caption is. Same with Facebook. So what I like to do is if I have like a bunch of pictures that I have in my camera roll, I'll try and pick and choose ones and like pre-plan that content to go out ahead of time. And just have like photos in my camera roll for slow days that I don't know what I should post on those days too. But don't just ever feel like you need to post just to post. Because if you're feeling like you just have to post, that's kind of just a waste of time, right? Like you just probably aren't going to have that much quality content going out. So I always just say it's better to have quality over quantity. And so I would much rather to have people posting 2 to 3 great posts a week than 5 to 7 like mediocre posts a week.
I have a question. I don't know if this is a good time for it. You'd mentioned about if you're not getting engagement, then you need to look at what you're posting. But is there, I mean, if you're just starting out, you're not going to get a lot of engagement right away. It's going to take some time to build that audience. So do you have a recommended time frame in which they should maybe relook at the content? What is capturing people's attention?
I like to review content on a monthly basis. Kind of look at that bigger picture in time. And when you're starting out, it might be something that you look at a quarterly basis to see kind of what are the bigger trends that you're seeing. Now in my business, I'm looking at things more on like a weekly basis, just because I have more like a pattern that I'm following, more followers that we have engaging with us. So I can kind of see what went well, what didn't go well. But when you don't really have a lot of followers and you're still kind of building up that pattern, I'd say even if you started like, with a couple months worth of content and then reviewing to see what went well, what didn't go as well, that would be okay. But I think like, yeah, you don't really know in the beginning because you're just starting out, right?
Yeah, I wanted to just bring that forward because I know some of my posts go, oh, nobody's listening. I guess I'm done, and get discouraged. But to recognize it takes a little bit of time to build a following.
Yes, it does take time. That's a big question I get too is, how do I build my following? And the biggest thing I'll tell you is that it's consistency. So it's not like you're posting once a week or once a month. It's posting consistently a few times every week that you're on a platform and you're making things happen. So for me, like it depends again what you're selling. There's more interest in certain industries than others, but for some industries, it's a lot easier to gain followers than a social media, let's say, company. But for me, of like consistent posting on Instagram for like 2.5 years, that's 1,600 followers for me right now. Like it does depend on what your industry is. For me, I'd say like my ideal audience isn't always on Instagram. For me, I find LinkedIn is a bit more, but I still want to be relevant on Instagram. I still find it worthy to do, but yeah, it does take time. So you really have to know that it's a long-term game. You're in it for the long haul if you want to do it. And if you want to get quick followers, it's really not the way to go, because to build a thoughtful audience around you, it does take a long time. So you just have to view it as like it's not a quick win. You have to be patient. And I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated, is because they want to see that immediate interaction. So when I talk about strategy in just a few slides here, I'll mention kind of what I use to measure those things.
Okay, I was actually going to ask that next. So I'll just let you finish with what you have here, and then we'll get into engagement or strategy. Sorry, we are in engagement.
Yeah. The next thing about boosting engagement is sharing less work and product photos and more about you photos. And people sometimes shy away from this because they don't always want themselves to be involved in like the corporate accounts. And I'm not sharing that you have to like be posting what you had for breakfast that day. I'm just saying like sharing more about the company, the story, who works at the company, why you started the company. Those are really impactful things to share about your brand. So personalizing your brand is really important. I always say to run a brand, not a business, and showing different facets of your life. That really helps like build engagement. So for me, when I'm showing pictures of my daughter, my dogs, like social media conferences, traveling, those types of photos, they build personality around the brand. They show like real humans work there, like what you can expect when you meet us in person. And we try and give some personality around our team members too. Like, you know, we do little profiles like, here's Allie, like this is what she likes to do for fun. Like, here's what her day looks like at Simplified Social. And I think like that just gives people a little bit more of like a taste of who they're working with. And you don't have to make it, you know, too personal. You can take it as far as you want to, but it just gives people a better sense of community with Instagram, especially.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is that when you can personalize things, people kind of see your values and what you stand for and what you believe in. And that's the connection you're really trying to create in social media that you can't create because you're not face to face with them at that time. So it's really important, I think, to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry about that.
Oh, good. The next thing about this calls to engagement and boosting engagement is to actually ask for engagement. So if you have a low number of followers and a high level of engagement, that's a good thing. Like it's better to have that. Don't buy followers or likes, but also ask for engagement. So with Instagram, for example, if you share something like, you know, you can say like tag a friend below who would agree with this, or double tap this post if you agree, or like this photo if you agree. Like ask for those calls to engagement. Instagram, that's okay to do that. Facebook, it's okay to do that too, but just you can't do it in a contest format. So like I said earlier, just educate yourself on like the platform standards, especially when it comes to advertising. It's okay to do the tag a friend thing as long as it's not with the advertising on Facebook. But if you want to get more people to engage with your content, one example of this is we did a quick contest a few weeks ago, just trying to promote some local businesses just in this weird time that we're in. Just tag your favorite local business below. And we had, you know, over 200 comments just in a matter of hours of people tagging their favorite local businesses because people want to have that exposure and that connection. So little things like that can go a long way, and having more engagement and having people kind of feel that sense of community, that's really what you're trying to get out of social media. Obviously you want sales from spending money and time on marketing, but it comes from doing those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go into marketing, I think, and you can correct me again if I'm wrong, when you go into marketing focusing on sales, you're going to miss the mark.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yes.
The last thing here with engagement is hashtag thoughtfully and intentionally. So I think that people, especially on Instagram, I wouldn't recommend hashtagging on Facebook. You really don't need to do that. People do it and it really is redundant. But with hashtagging, I think people think it's like, if I hashtag a million things on this post, it's going to do a million things better for me. Hashtags are only 12% more likely to receive better engagement. So just be careful of what hashtags you're choosing. I say it's better to choose like 10 to 15 hashtags that are actually relevant to your business than trying to like be spammy with the hashtags that you're picking. So I see some people will use like hashtag like for like and hashtag follow for follow, and just like don't do that. In Edmonton, especially, like hashtag YEG biz is really popular. So trying to look at what's relevant to your industry and try and build your community that way, that's a better way to go around that. You can also follow hashtags too now on Instagram, so they can actually show up in your feed. So you can find new accounts to follow that way. And just be mindful of the shadow ban. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't.
So the shadow ban is if you're constantly using the same hashtags over and over again, Instagram will just like make it so that no one can see the hashtags that you're using temporarily. So they don't tell you that they've done it, but essentially what happens is they put like a temporary like block on your hashtags being visible by other people. So the whole point of a hashtag is that you'd be able to increase your reach. So if I'm using hashtag, you know, Nursepreneur conference, I'd want people to be able to see my content that aren't following me. But if I put Nursepreneur conference on every single post, and I was abusing it essentially, Instagram might say, okay, this girl's like not switching up her hashtag. She's using this way too much. I'm just going to make it so that no one is seeing this hashtag that she's using. So then only the people that followed me would see that I was using that hashtag. So basically it's taking away the incentive of hashtags.
Interesting.
Usually what I find is like if your engagement goes down, you can tell pretty quickly that they're kind of watching the hashtags that you're using. But what was happening here is that there was a lot of issues with human trafficking, some inappropriate hashtags being used. So now they're just being really mindful of it, and they want you to switch up the hashtags you're using. So I'd say don't just copy and paste hashtags into the post that you're doing, but try and switch up your hashtags as often as possible.
Very interesting.
Yes. Good times. So much to know.
All right.
All right, we'll get into strategy now. So strategy is really where my passion lies with social media, because I think it's so important. And I always tell people that it doesn't need to be something where it's like this beautifully bound document that you have all the answers to. A social media strategy can be something as simple as like, this is how often I'm going to post. These are the platforms I'm going to post to. And this is like, you know, the type of content I'm going to post. Like for some clients, it's like a sticky note, like a reminder to them, like this is like my goal for the week. The biggest thing with strategy too is defining the why. So why are you on social media? Is it a good fit for your brand? What is the purpose for your company? And what are your goals from social media? We all want more sales. We all want more money, but we have to realize that there's a step-by-step process we have to get to sales. So if people don't know about you, they can't buy from you. So obviously brand awareness is part of it, but brand awareness doesn't always pay the bills. So knowing, like I said earlier, you're in it for the long run, that's a big, like setting the expectations right out the gate that I like to get out of the way in the beginning, because sometimes people will start posting and say, well, no one's bought anything from my website, and they get really upset right away. So I just like to be really clear with people that it really just depends what you're selling too. So if you're selling something that's like a lower selling price, it might be easier to convert sales right away. If you're selling something like, you know, financial services, you know, the no like trust factor is there, where you really have to trust someone before you're going to invest your money with them. So seeing a few posts on social media doesn't mean that they're going to invest their money with you. So just knowing what you sell and what that sales cycle looks like is so important. And social media definitely aids in that, but it doesn't do the whole job for some people sometimes. So for social media goals, there's different ones that you can set. And I always recommend that people set these monthly, quarterly, and yearly for their business. So some goals, example of goals that you could set. So you could increase engagement by 50%. If you're just starting out, you could say, I want to get 100 new followers on my Instagram profile by January, or I want to establish an email sign-up conversion rate from social media of 1%, or I want 50% of my website users to come from social media in the month of April. Be really specific with what these goals are, because the more specific they are, the better you can measure them. So here's just an example of a social media metrics map, because I'm a little bit nerdy and I really like the data part of social. So one thing that I really like to keep in mind is with this map, there's kind of this journey that buyers can take, right? And so first thing is awareness. So like I said, if no one knows about you, they can't buy from you. So awareness is a really big part of social media. From awareness, it goes to consideration. From consideration, it goes to adoption. From consideration, it goes to adoption. Adoption, it goes to advocacy. So if they like you, ideally, they're going to become your best advocate and tell everyone about you. Mm-hmm. The thing with this too is there's different objectives, different strategy, different activities, and different things to measure for each stage of these activities. And so what I would say with anyone looking to develop a strategy is that there's different things to keep in mind. So the activity that you would take to build awareness might not be the same thing that you're doing in the adoption and the decision categories for your customers. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that you need to remember is that this is a long-term thing. It's not a quick fix. There's campaigns you can run for a more quick fix type of option, like with paid ads and things like that. But with organic social, the idea here is that you're creating awareness, you're generating some demand, and then you're driving conversion for your business.
Do you have like an estimated timeline? Say, is this like a 2-year project, or like, do you have any ideas around an expected timeline when you could go from awareness to advocacy?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on like what I said like earlier, like how much your service is and what you're selling.
Hmm.
But I'll give you an example of a client that we work with. They're a dental hygiene clinic. So we do a lot of work with them on their social media, and really working on getting people into the clinic with online booking and then going back in to try and get them to advocate for the clinic after. And it was about a 6-month timeline that we saw this happen. So usually if people are happy, they want to tell all their friends about it. But you also have to remember vice versa. If people aren't happy, they will do the same thing. So the best thing you can have is a positive review. That means so much to your business. So knowing that, like how you can nurture that advocacy piece. So encouraging Google reviews, encouraging Facebook reviews, those types of things after someone comes to see you is a really positive, like nurturing sequence after someone's come to visit you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. It really just depends on the type of business. But the more that you're kind of out there, the more that you're top of mind with people, like when they might not be ready for you now, but if they keep seeing you and you're top of mind, that when they are ready, the idea is that they'll come to you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like the steps to change. You'd have to be aware that there's an issue first, and then once you're aware of it, you have to realize that there's people out there who can offer a solution, and then you're going to act on it. Seems very similar to that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of like my very like in-depth map of social media metrics. Like there's different things obviously to measure, but the thing is, it depends on the business. It depends like what your actual like sales cycle looks like. But just keep in mind like what your key performance indicators are. So is it impressions? Is it people seeing your post? Is it people booking now? Is it people actually paying for something online? Being able to measure those things really quickly is important. And any kind of measurement tool that you're able to use with social is important too. So I'll talk a little bit more about like, the different like uh, social media management tools and platforms that we can use, but like all the platforms themselves individually have like an analytics feature within them. Some of them are more limited than others. Instagram, for example, they only keep the data within Instagram for 7 days at a time, which isn't very helpful and holistic to a business owner. Facebook keeps it for 28 days. But if you look into other software options, they can keep that data for more of like a holistic, like 6 to 12-month period of time, which can help you make better business decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Are there, I'm not sure if you're finished on this one, but are there any best practices we need to keep in mind when we're working on our strategy?
Yes. So there's lots of different things to keep in mind when it comes to best practices. I'll kind of go through them very quickly for you, but there's lots of different options. The best thing that I would say right out of the gate is posting at the proper frequency. Lots to be said about what proper actually means, but Facebook, it's at least 5 times per week, which might be overwhelming. Like I said, let's start with quality versus quantity. So let's say like 3 times a week. Twitter at least 1 time per day, LinkedIn at least 3 times per week, and Instagram at least 4 to 5 times per week. These are like what's been done by research saying that that's the most effective. Follow the 80-20 rule. So users are really far less likely to interact with brands if they feel like they're being marketed to. No one likes to feel like they're being marketed to in a good day, especially right now. So the 80-20 rule is that 80% of what you post should be engaging. So it's asking your audience questions, it's posting photos, it's doing like a curated article or something, fun to share. And 20% should be about your company, your products, or your services. Next is investing in a social media dashboard. So like I said earlier, looking at something that can help you a little bit so you don't have to actually go into Facebook or Instagram every time you want to post. So tools like Hootsuite, Sprout Social, Buffer, they allow you to schedule posts and measure your engagement and monitor social mentions about your business from one place versus having to go to all these different platforms. There's different options. There are different price points. Hootsuite, they do have a free option that you can try, which is kind of where I tell people to start. They also have an academy that can help you with some free training to kind of get you started. But what I find a lot of people that are small entrepreneurs are doing is they sit down for one day when they have the time, they schedule messages to go out, and then they kind of alleviate some of that social media stress for them. The one thing I'll really hesitate with people on this is please don't set it and forget it. So sometimes people will just like schedule a bunch of stuff to go out and then they walk away from it. They don't check their messages. They don't reply to comments. So just make sure that if you are going to be like using any kind of auto schedule feature, that you're still going in to check your platforms at least once a day. The other thing too is to pay attention to your industry and your competitors. So I always say that social media is just like glorified stalking. So see what your competitors are posting, what they're up to, looking at trending hashtags. Sometimes that's a good opportunity for business to see what's going on. So if you look at like any kind of national days that are coming up, like National Cookie Eating Day or like, National Dog Day, those things are usually quite popular and do well on social media. Just really make sure that you don't jump on trending hashtags before you know what they mean. I also like to say to sign up for Google Alerts or Mention to get notified of keywords and trends. So I have a Google Alert set up for social media Edmonton and then a Google Alert set up for Simplified Social. That way, if any articles are posted about social media in Edmonton or Simplified Social, that it comes right to my inbox and I don't have to go searching for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's free.
Would that go across multiple platforms? So if there's a mention of you on, oh yeah? Do you have to specify that when you sign up for it, or it just automatically does it all?
So Google will kind of just crawl the internet for it. Mention, I believe you have to kind of pick which platforms you want it to come on, but it does monitor all that social kind of chatter about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And some pro tips just to kind of keep in mind as you're getting started into your social media journey is just trying to keep your username and your handle as consistent as possible. Just try and make it as easy as for people to find you. So like if your Instagram name is Simplified Social, your Facebook username should try and be Simplified Social. The problem with getting into the game a little bit later is sometimes usernames can be taken. So just try and keep them as close together as possible. If you have to add a 1 or like an underscore, that's totally okay. I always tell people too to try and make your profile picture for your business page your business logo. It just keeps things more professional and easier for people to find you. And putting the URLs to your social platforms on as many places as possible. So put them on your website, your email signature, your promotional material. Let people know you're on social media and encourage them to follow you. And that's all I had. So I know we've kind of gone through a lot today and probably a little bit over time, but if you have any questions that you had left for me, I would be happy to answer them.
We did a great job just letting me ask them as we go through because I wouldn't remember them at the end of it all. And I think you've done a really great job of kind of covering the basics of many of the different platforms so that the entrepreneurs who are watching, they'll probably have comfort level with a particular platform already, but you've given them some ideas to how to expand and move beyond just that daily interaction with it to move it towards a professional business. So I appreciate you spending that time with us so much, Alex. It's been great having you on the Nursepreneur Conference 2020 Alberta.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Tammy. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to share my information too. It's just hello@simplifiedsocial.ca. Yeah, I know it can be overwhelming, but what I really just want to like drill home here is pick 1 or 2 platforms, do them well. And then if you have questions, just feel free to reach out to the experts because I know it can be a bit overwhelming when you're getting started, but social media really is so important.
I love that you're nerdy about it because we need people who are all those metrics. Whoosh.
I know, it's overwhelming, but yeah, it is important.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for having me.